So greetings, friends and followers. This is Nurses Talking, and I am Del Barzi. As usual, if you like what you see and hear, give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment. We'd love to know what you think. So today, my guest is Vanessa Ruiz. Vanessa is a registered nurse and also a naturopathic physician practicing out of Arizona. So welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Welcome for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time coming to speak with us today. In just introducing you just now, I also forgot to include that you are the founder of Nurses for Natural Health.
That's correct.
Yes? Okay. So let's start with me. What made you want to become a nurse?
I had this vision that I was going to be like a Florence Nightingale. Like I was going to hold people's hands and really like be with them through some of the hardest parts of their lives. That was literally the image that I had when I decided I was going to become a nurse. And it was just this genuine like desire to help people.
And so was this always, I mean, did you decide this as a child, as an adult?
I think it was always.
Always.
My brother shared a memory with me, and essentially it was when I was really young, my dad got hurt and I was automatically like, I'm going to go get the Band-Aids, and I just took care of his little paper cut, but it like meant the whole world to me. And my brother, like we're 2 years apart, so I think I was like 3 at the time and he was 5, and he understood that I had this deep desire to serve people in that way.
Awesome. Well, whatever you did, it must have been very impressive that he remembers this, and to recount it to you must have been very impressive. So I see that you're from the Philippines, but you became a nurse in the United States, yes?
Yes, that's correct. I was actually born in the Philippines and came to the United States when I was 6 years old.
Oh, okay. So you grew up in the United States. So once you became a nurse, what areas did you work in? What drew you?
What areas did I not work in?
You should have looked for answer again.
Right. So my first job out of nursing school, it was actually during the 2008 recession. So it was actually really quite difficult to find a job at the time. But I started off in rehab. And then after that, I just didn't feel like my role, I didn't feel like I fit in that role.
Yeah.
And then I went to pediatrics, and then I went to geriatrics. Didn't feel like I fit in that role either. And then I went on to case management, which actually afforded me the ability to be able to go back to school part-time, and kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to do, because I was kind of going through these different areas and not really feeling like I fit, not really feeling like I could express the desire to heal or help people heal in the way that I had multiple health issues at the time, and I was using nutrition, I was using homeopathy, herbs, all these things to help heal myself, but I felt like I couldn't share that with my patients at the time. And then after that, I went to Cameroon, which is what you were saying. I went to Cameroon and I did travel nursing, because like, why not, right?
Why not, indeed.
And it was really just to explore I got a chance to explore all the different facets of nursing.
Yeah. So you piqued my interest a little bit. How was it in Cameroon?
It was completely different. So first of all, it was a little bit of a culture shock, because I had to first, after I arrived at the airport, I had to essentially like take a 6-hour ride through like jungle and not really having, it was just through dirt roads. And then at a certain point we had to like get on a motorcycle, and I'm like, is going on? So it was like
Okay.
intense culture shock. And then when I got into the hospital, I knew about Western chronic diseases, but essentially like the diseases in Cameroon, I had no idea, because they were talking about dengue fever and malaria and essentially
Mm-hmm.
tropical and infectious diseases, which
Yeah.
we don't really get. We get some in nursing school, but not to the extent
Mm-hmm.
um, that I was immersed
That you
in.
see, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So different manifestations of disease processes, but it was, um, and also it was a very, so this hospital was what they call, it was in the bush.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, there was very minimal resources. So we had to we had to make things. We had to reuse gloves. We had to just be really resourceful
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with what we
With
had.
what you have. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it made me a better nurse because I just had to be that much more resourceful. Um, and also the language barrier is different.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that you talk about diseases are different. The way you educate is different because
Okay. Okay.
you have to look at it from the lens of the culture that you're in. And so there's a lot of folklore associated with
Okay.
illnesses.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I could talk about germ theory, I could talk about, infection, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it didn't translate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I oftentimes had to really recruit the the people that were living, that had been born in that area, to help me translate in the words
Mm-hmm.
that my patients would understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit of a culture shock, but it was a beautiful experience, and I still
Yeah.
think about that time that I was there, and I wish I could go back.
Sounds like an education in itself, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, as you said, having to become so resourceful and so innovative, actually, it just forces you to grow in ways that you didn't even know you could grow.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So then you became a naturopathic physician.
Yeah. Great question. And I think I felt limited as a nurse, primarily because we're working under doctor's orders in the majority of the time. And while I was in nursing school, I had actually gotten quite sick, and I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
But then the way that I cured myself, I actually first went to regular doctors, and their approach to helping me heal was through medications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I wasn't getting any relief. So the answer was, well, why don't you double the medications? And I thought, double it. Okay, I'll try that. And then that didn't work. So then they asked me to triple it. and and that didn't work. In fact, it actually made me even
Maybe
sicker,
worse. Uh-huh.
made me absolutely worse. And I actually had to start other medications to palliate some of the symptoms I was having. So at that point, I just got so frustrated. I just got so frustrated with this system. And so I started to actually get into nutrition. And that was really the first time that I was really exploring, because we get taught some nutrition, but not quite
Yeah.
the way that
Yeah.
I entered into it. I got, essentially, it was nutrition. I got into meditation because my
Mm-hmm.
stress levels were off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I actually ran into my first naturopathic doctor, and that was about 4 years after I started nursing. I
Mm.
found my first naturopathic doctor, and it was through a nutrition class, actually, that I met him. And I sheepishly, after the class, I was like, can I shadow you, because I'm really interested in what you're doing. And I shadowed him, fell completely in love with the medicine, and I also saw the incredible results he was having with his patients.
Okay.
Things that we had in conventional medicine, we don't have a cure for. However, his patients were coming back and saying, I feel so much better. He was getting incredible results. And I was like, I really want whatever you're doing, whatever magic it is, I
Mhm,
want some of that.
mhm, mhm.
And then I went to naturopathic school, and then I'm here.
Here you are. Here you are. And
Yeah.
so, um, how is that received though? Do you find that people are a little bit hesitant to? Well, I imagine the people who would come to you are people who are pretty much on board already anyway. But
Yeah.
outside of that, dedicated group, outside of preaching to that choir, um, when you talk about your naturopathy and stuff like that um, in 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 your circle of friends, in your circle of acquaintances and all that, how is that received?
It's a So in 2012, when I first started, it was, I don't think people understood it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a significant change just even the last 3 years,
Yeah.
of people really wanting to know more about it. And a lot of nurses are actually asking me, like, I've been interested in naturopathic medicine. How'd you get here? And
Yes.
so I do mentor nurses who are looking to transition into a more integrative and holistic space. So
Yes.
what I've ultimately seen is that people are very interested. I think that the model is, the conventional healthcare system has severe limitations.
Yeah.
And I think that naturopathic medicine, as well as functional medicine, can help to fill those gaps and those limitations. And I think also with the internet and everything that we're being exposed to,
Yeah.
there's a lot more availability and education about natural and integrated medicine. So I think people have been receiving it. Also, I speak for a national organization for continuing education,
Mm.
and they've they've been asking me to do more courses in education for therapists, for psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interest out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that that's really important because, as you say, the conventional stuff leaves out a big and very important part of healthcare and, preventive medicine and all of that kind of thing. So, I'm quite happy to hear you say that, it's being more and more better and better received. And I think it goes along with quite a few other things as well, becoming more aware of what we're putting out into the environment, what we're putting into our bodies, what we, avoiding things like pesticides and all of those things. I think are coming together and helping all of this to come. And so that's great. I really love the fact that people are being stepping on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your practice, though, um, do you have a particular specialty? For example, are you treating particularly older people, younger people, children, or is it just a general practice?
Yeah. So in my practice, I've been marketing mostly towards people who have anxiety, depression, and complex PTSD and PTSD. That
Mm.
seems to be where I really feel like I'm making the most impact.
Okay. Okay.
And I do private, and I also do group coaching. So I kind of do a mixture of the two. I find that with group coaching, I'm able to give people the skills that they need. And then in one-on-one, I'm able to kind of help hone in on where that client might have some limitations, where I can optimize their health.
Mhm,
A lot of the tools that I use are homeopathy, acupuncture, because in the state
mhm,
of Arizona, I am able to do acupuncture. I do things like exercise, movement, physical medicine. I also sometimes, for some patients, I actually do medications.
mhm, mhm.
In the state of Arizona, we are licensed to prescribe medications, except like antipsychotics. And so I have a lot of tools in my tool belt to help patients,
Mhm.
and it's done in kind of an integrative way.
So I want to ask if do you think that people are becoming more, there's a lot more trauma, um, burnout, this kind of thing, it seems to me that there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension. Sometimes I feel like you can almost feel it in the air. Do you think so? Or is it?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think what's missing in our healthcare system is a strong understand. First of all, a strong understanding of trauma,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
what it actually takes to heal trauma. Because trauma is not it. It can be stabilized with medications and therapy. Stabilized, meaning that
yeah.
that patient isn't getting worse,
It's
but they're
maintained.
not always getting better. In fact, in that model, sometimes they can actually get re-traumatized.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that trauma, the way that to actually heal trauma is multifactorial. You have to make the body feel like it's safe through nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
regulating the blood sugar, making sure they don't have nutrient deficiencies, because any of those are going to turn on the alarms of the body. Okay. And then after that, helping them to feel safe emotionally, mentally, and also in a community setting. What I've noticed, especially over the last, with everything that's happening in COVID, that we're missing the key aspect of trauma healing, which is co-regulation,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that somebody whose nervous system is regulated takes over somebody whose nervous system isn't regulated, or helps them to regulate themselves. What I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is kind of soothing measures. And instead, what's happening is we're quarantining, we're pulling away from society, we're kind of becoming more isolated, and there's constant threat activation that's happening, but we don't have that co-regulatory
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
aspect where people come together and say,
Yeah.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
we've got this. We've
Yeah.
got this together. You can
Yeah.
lean on me.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to be okay. We're missing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what people are doing is they're kind of, I've seen, is just stimulating that aspect of threat activation by watching news, by focusing in on the things that can really trigger them and
Yeah.
kind of destabilize them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do see a lot more trauma. And in my practice, I really have seen a lot more people kind of burnt out, because you've now asked them to be physiologically, mentally, and emotionally resilient now
Yeah.
for almost 2 years without having kind of respite.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see it happening. I see it among, I don't work full time anymore. I do a little, I putter a little bit here and there and help out sometimes in with things like auditing stuff and things like that. But as I talk to nurses, what I'm seeing is that they have been maintaining this high level of adrenaline for such a long time, and now it's almost like it's almost like a crash,
and biologically, you can't expect that sympathetic threat activation response.
Yeah,
It's only meant really for short periods of
yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And so people ultimately end up having burnout. And I actually just did a talk in Las Vegas last week at the Rehab Summit on burnout prevention and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, I think prevention is probably too late. That we're actually in the mitigation
Yeah,
phase.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would probably have to agree with that. I would probably have to agree with that, because we don't even seem to realize that's what's happening.
Yeah.
We don't even seem to realize that's what's happening.
No. And that's one of the key things about burnout, is that you can't see the forest from the trees anymore. You can't
Mm-hmm.
see the next step.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of stuck in this loop of, I need to just survive and keep going and going, when really the next step is really rest. Rest and time away. And there also needs to be a system in place where that person who is in burnout needs to be nurtured, restored by the community, by another structure. And
that community isn't there right now.
we don't have that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so you created, Nurses for Natural Health.
Yes.
What is that?
Yeah, so it's an organization that's meant to empower, educate, and also encourage nurses to do form of self-care, and also learn about natural medicine. Because in what was painful for me when I was moving from that transition to nurse and then naturopathic doctor was not having the words, a path. I was essentially just kind of getting a lot of certifications and all these different things. And then when meeting my naturopathic doctor, it all just came together. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I could study this one thing
Mm-hmm.
and it would be able to kind of educate me on what I wanted to do as a healer. Right. So I spent a lot of time, invested a lot of money in kind of these random certifications, trying to find my path. And like
Yeah. Yeah.
all I knew was I did not want to be on the floor as a nurse. That's
Yeah.
all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
That the way that I was as a healer, I couldn't express as a nurse. So it was a really hard and conflicting time for me because I didn't know that there was naturopathic medicine. I didn't know that I could go to natural medicine and how to even make that leap,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
we feel like there's such a big gap in education and even practicing. Like,
Yeah.
how do I go from practicing with medication, telling my patients, okay, this is what you can expect, these are the side effects, this is how to take them, and then suddenly going into practicing with herbs or even like homeopathy? Like, how does that work? How does that
Mm-hmm.
translate? Or even nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I had this inherent conflict, and okay, this is how I heal myself, but this is what I'm actually doing as a career and as a healer.
Yeah.
So it came about because I wanted to take out that whole conflict in trying to help, trying to for nurses to try to find natural medicine. I just wanted to make it easy for them. So here, these are all the things that is available to us as healers and that we can actually like do with our clients. So it just kind of takes out all that guesswork for them.
Yeah. 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 That's so that really is awesome. And before I forget, because as we go along, I forget stuff. But before I forget, I'm going to ask you to send me that information so I can put it in the description box at the end of this video, so that nurses who would like to find it, if they're not able to, that's just one other way that they can probably find it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also, burnout has been a tremendous, like it's kind of been a call of action for me
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
really like help even more and kind of lean
Yeah.
into the problem we have as nurses.
Yeah.
And so I have also created a coaching program
Okay.
for nurses that are burnt out and how to be able to recover from that, because it's so painful when you're in burnout. And
It is.
I've been there
Mhm.
multiple times.
Mhm.
And digging yourself out of that hole can be really tough.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you almost think get you think you'd never get out. And very often people don't even know how to start getting out. So that's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah.
What would you say so far is your greatest achievement?
Okay. Right now, the thing that comes the most to me is, I would say my greatest achievement, other than being a doctor, becoming a nurse, running my private practice, is really an internal thing. It's an internal
Mhm.
achievement, which is
Mhm.
essentially having built the confidence as a healer
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and having built the confidence through healing myself and helping heal others. I think that's my biggest accomplishment,
That's
because
awesome.
that's something that no one can take away from you.
Right, right. And it's not even something that you can be taught. You really have to.
Not
Yeah.
education,
Mhm.
through experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. That really is just awesome. So, um, two things I want to ask. A, you mentioned self-care a little while ago, and I want to know, I always ask nurses about self-care. what exactly does self-care mean to you?
Okay. And I'm gonna self-care meant various things depending on what was going on in my life. Right now, self-care, it had meant maybe exercising, meditation, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of now become just habits, and they're not really like, they're not something that I have to really focus on as self-care.
Okay.
My biggest thing in self-care is actually boundaries.
Okay.
And the reason why is because when you are in a creative zone and space, it's such a great place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just in this flow state. And boundaries are so important because if you don't put the boundaries down, you get moved out of that creative space and you move into stress and you're no longer in flow. And so boundaries for me means that I get to stay in flow. They're sometimes difficult conversations to have. Sometimes structures need to be put in place, but it's really boundaries so I can keep doing what I love doing and be in my creative zone. So that's what self-care looks like to me right now.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that because, you know, many of us have difficulty with boundaries, with setting boundaries, and especially as nurses, and especially as, you know, we have all worked in situations where you're kind of like expected to do extra, you're expected to take the extra shift, and you're made to feel guilty if you don't, and you know, all of that kind of, and you have to learn. If you say no, if you don't pick up your phone, you know, you walk around with this guilt thing inside of you, and you know.
Yeah, and what I understood is when I didn't put down boundaries, I went from this flow state to now being anxious and kind of having all these, like all this stuff build up inside of me. But when I was just clear, I could just relax.
You can just, exactly.
I've already expressed, I've created structures. So it feels really good to have those boundaries down, even though it might not at the moment.
Yeah, I know, but you know, yeah, it's like getting better.
Yeah.
So I am collecting words, Vanessa, and I want to know if you could express in one word the most essential quality of a nurse, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would have to say heart.
Heart. Okay.
Yeah. The reason why I say that is because when you're guided by your heart, when you're guided by whatever that means to you, like for me, that means compassion. It means love. When you're guided by that, it's a different way of being. You're moving from what intrinsically brings you joy and happiness and acting in alignment with that.
Okay. That's so very well put. I love that. That's so very well put. I started asking for these words as I spoke to people and realized that so many people are coming to this profession from so many different paths. And so I want to know what propelled them, what motivated them, what did you see? What was the one thing that you saw in someone else that made you want to, or felt within yourself that made you want to do this? And so that's why I started asking for these words. And I've gotten so many different ones. It's amazing. I think I'm actually going to compile some kind of book.
Maybe, or, you know, maybe this is your next business venture is essentially like making, like, you know how they have card decks?
Yes.
Like card decks for the nurse's soul.
Look at that. I'm going to write it down. Card decks for the nurse's soul. That is so well put.
You might want to copyright that before you put this out on the YouTube world.
Awesome. So awesome. So awesome. Vanessa, I don't know how to thank you for today. Thank you so very, very much for doing this. You know, we hooked up a couple of months ago and I thought at one point, I said, you know, she probably forgot. And then when I reached out, you responded right away. So thank you so very much. Thank
You're
you.
so welcome. This was a ton of fun. So
Have a wonderful evening, Vanessa. Thank
yes,
you.
you too. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.